John chapter 17 is where I want to draw our focus. In John chapter 17, beginning at verse 20, Jesus prays a prayer for us. He prays a prayer for himself in the preceding verses and then prays for his disciples. But in this particular passage, Jesus takes time to pray for us. And I want to, for a few moments, draw from what Jesus presents us in this prayer. I'm reading out of the Christian Standard Bible, but whatever version you have in front of you is fine. This is how my Bible reads. In John chapter 17, beginning at verse 20. I pray not only for these, but also for those who believe in me through their word. May they all be one, as you, Father, are in me and I am in you. May they also be in us, so that the world may believe that you sent me. I have given them the glory you have given me, so that they may be one as we are one. I am in them, and you are in me, so that they may be made completely one, that the world may know you have sent me and have loved them as you have loved me. Father, I want those you have given me to be with me where I am, so that they will see my glory, which you have given me because you loved them before the world's foundation. Righteous Father, the world has not known you. However, I have known you, and they have known that you sent me. I made your name known to them and will continue to make it known, so that the love you have loved me with may be in them, and I may be in them. Righteous Father, it is our prayer this morning that as we press into the truths of your word, that you would unite our hearts on one accord to be one. Long ago, there was a town nestled by a beautiful, clean river. For generations, the river was the lifeblood, providing fresh water for drinking and irrigation. On my way here, the beautiful drive allowed me to pass a lake. And many of you in this room have spent some good quality time on that lake. But I'm not sure, maybe you can tell me, I don't know if the foundation of this town is built on that lake. And if it was, you would understand the plight the people in this town are about to experience. Because this river that is a part of their community, it is the very essence of their life. But over time, as we are experiencing in Texas and in the DFW and our surrounding areas, there were these factories that developed. And so many companies are coming this way. You can understand that as these factories developed, there'll begin to be pollution that occurred coming from upstream. And that once beautiful river that gave life to that town grew murky and foul. The townspeople, they were distressed, and so they held a town meeting, and together they wrote out this beautiful, passionate prayer. This beautiful, passionate prayer to God for the river's restoration. They prayed for clean water. They prayed for the fish to return. They prayed for the factories to cease their contamination. They prayed the same prayer for years. Every Sunday, without fail. And in their town square, they even erected this beautiful monument with the prayer etched into it. Yet, the river continued to get worse. The pollution grew thicker, and the once vibrant ecosystem slowly died. One day, a child, having heard the ancient stories of that once beautiful, flowing, clean, fresh river, stood up after the Sunday prayer and asked this question: if our prayer is so beautiful, why does our river remain so ugly? What a powerful question. This simple question hung in the air, challenging the town's comfortable but ineffective ritual. This challenging question posed for them to consider then about their river, but also for us to consider today about the ugly things in our lives. In John chapter 17, Jesus prays a magnificent prayer. And he prays this magnificent prayer for us, for his future disciples, for his future followers, that we might be one and that the world would know the Father has sent him. But notice, friends, that Jesus doesn't just wish for unity. He models it. His entire life was a living prayer. And ultimately, his sacrificial death was the greatest demonstration of his desire to unite us with God and one another. And friends, I want to encourage you through the encouragement of this passage today that one prayer is all it takes. But when I say one prayer, I'm using it dually. I'm using it to say that one singular prayer can be all it takes, yes, but I'm also suggesting, friends, that one prayer, a unifying prayer, is all it takes. He was not just asking God to magically make something happen. He was showing us how to live into that reality. And today, when we pray for unity in our world, when we pray for unity in our community, for the world to know Christ, for love to prevail, we must not be like those townspeople that prayed for the river week in and week out, month in and month out, year in and year out. We must also be the people that get to work, modeling the love, modeling the unity that we desire to see, so that our faith is not just this collection of wishes, but a powerful force that changes the world. For those of you who might be young in this room, maybe middle school, high school age, you're going to get into a season in your English class or whatever class it might be that causes you to write, and there's going to be this thing called the thesis statement. It is a statement that expresses what your entire essay is going to be about. And in my sermonic preparation, I call it the big idea. And so here's my thesis statement, friends. Here's my big idea. And if you had a long night last night, I give the big idea so that if you need to take a nap, you can, and I won't be offended. You can leave service Sunday morning saying, I know what the preacher preached about. Here it is. Here's the sentence. My big idea is this: you can ask God for the things you are willing to live out. I'll say that again. You can ask God for the things you are willing to live out. See, Jesus, he prays this one prayer. He prays this one prayer, which is commonly referred to as his high priestly prayer. Because, as a priest would do, he intercedes for his followers. Intercession is this big word that we use in church in Christendom to describe praying for others, asking for their well-being, asking for guidance, or for God's intervention in their lives. For my parents and grandparents who are in the room, you know what it is to intercede, because you find yourselves often probably praying for your children or your grandchildren, or for those of us who are blessed in this room, your great-grandchildren. That's what Jesus does for us. Like a sibling that goes to a parent on behalf of the other siblings because they want some extra snack or they want some more TV time. Now, if you're like me growing up, whenever it came time for one of us to intercede for the others, to the parents, we had to count up the cost. Who was the last person to get in trouble? Whoever that person was disqualified because they might trigger our parents. Who brought home good grades? You know, who put the dishes away without being asked? Who made their bed? Whoever fit that category, they were worthy of going to our parents on behalf of the others. And what better example or model do we have to go before God on behalf of us than the sinless, stainless Jesus Christ? And he goes to God on our behalf. And he asks God, make them one, like you and I are one. See, intercession takes faith on behalf of the goer that the doer will do what is asked for the receiver. I'll say that again. Intercession takes faith on behalf of the goer, the one who goes, that the doer will do what needs to be done on behalf of the receiver. So when that brother or that sister goes to the parents, they have faith that the parents will do what they've asked on behalf of the other siblings. It's faith that is necessary to intercede. And above all, with so much going on in our world, might all of us be, from the youngest in the room to the oldest in the room, intercessors. Intercessors for our co-workers, intercessors for our friends, intercessors for our classmates, intercessors for our siblings, for our parents, our grandparents, our children, our grandchildren, intercessors for everyone who we come in contact with, because I'm not sure if you know this, friends, but the world needs God. And if you and I know who God is, then we know foolproof and full well what God is able to do. And who better to go to than the one who created the universe, God himself. Above it all, above all the calamity, above all the strife, above all the division and confusion that rests in our world, sits an omnipresent, omnipotent, omniscient God who is sovereign, who is real, and who is able to answer our prayers. Sometimes one prayer is all it takes. But if one prayer is all it takes, what do you ask God for in that prayer? Well, there are a few things that I believe this text shows us that you can ask God for in that one prayer. The first thing I think he shows us, Jesus Christ does, is that you can ask God for evangelistic legacy. You can ask God for evangelistic legacy. In verse number 20, he prays for those who believe in me, watch the language, through their word. Jesus specifies in verse 20 that there will be people who believe in him not because of his word, but because of their word. When he says their, who is he referring to? He's referring to his disciples, because John chapter 17 is a progression of prayers. That Jesus opens this chapter praying for himself, because he's not far away from that ultimate destiny and destination of the brutal cross. He prays for himself, but then he graduates from praying for himself to praying for his disciples. And by the time we get to verse number 20, he's now praying for the believer, but he recognizes that those believers will come to faith in him because of their word. It is through the witness of the apostles that many will come to faith in Jesus Christ. It is through their witness, both spoken and recorded in the New Testament, that subsequent generations would come to know and believe in Jesus. This verse establishes the foundation of the church across all generations. You know, the Christian faith is a word-based faith, passed from one generation to the next through the faithful proclamation of the gospel, the euangelion, which is the good news. And the greatest news that we can have is that Jesus came, Jesus lived, Jesus died, Jesus was raised from the dead, and he is coming back. That's the greatest news. And through this proclamation, Jesus uses the language, those who will believe, as one of certainty, not possibility. Because he knows with his divine foresight that the ministry of his disciples would be successful and that a church would be built upon their testimony. His certainty doesn't come from their ability, but from their source. That our churches are not great because of our ability. Our churches that have any significance at all have its significance because there is a source that is far greater than you and I that chooses to use the imperfections of you and I in order to deliver the gospel message to a world that is dying and that needs life. Let me put it to you this way. Have you ever looked down a spiral staircase? When I was in seminary, the hall that I stayed in, the dorm that I stayed in, had a spiral staircase in which from the top floor you could see all the way down. And from the bottom floor you could see all the way up. Now, there's a unique thing about the spiral staircase is that the same material that makes the top floor makes the bottom floor. The same stairs that are found on the fourth floor are found on the first floor. There is this continuity that takes place in order to see this spiral staircase come to fruition. And there was this mural, there was this image on the basement floor of the building. And if you walked up the stairs to the first floor, you could look down and see the image. If you walked up to the second floor, you could look down and see the same image. Third floor, you could look down and see the image. Fourth floor, you could look down and see the same image. The staircase was designed so that no matter what part of the staircase you were on, you could see the foundation of the building. It's like if you right now were to take your finger, and you can try this, and draw a spiral. Or if I were to have you take a piece of paper and a pen, create a dot in the center of the page and draw a spiral, you would recognize that after a while, you would be able to reach the limits of the page without ever having to lift your finger off the page. That ink that stretches to the edge of the paper has a foundation found in the center of the paper. It's all coming from the same source. Jesus, I want to suggest, is spiraling. Now wait. It's my first time here. I'm open to be inviting back. So I don't want you to say, hey, that preacher got up there and said Jesus was spiraling. That is what I said, but please place it in context. That Jesus is spiraling or praying a spiraling prayer by starting with a central focus, extending that focus without ever moving his focus from the central point. That Jesus prays to the Father and is praying for himself. And then that circle extends beyond himself to the disciples. And then that circle extends beyond the disciples to all of us who will believe. But he does not shift his focus from the source, who is the Father himself. And I want to encourage you, friends, that maybe you and I should pray spiraling prayers. Prayers that always focus on God. Always focus on who God is. Always focus on what God has promised. Always focus on what God has done. And even if those prayers might start with a need that you might have personally, don't let those prayers end with your need and what you need from God personally. Because there's somebody else that needs God too. You should pray spiraling prayers. I can imagine Dr. Joel Gregory, he sat down with me when I was working on this sermon, and he helped me here. So this sounds good, but I've got to give him the credit for it. He says, I would imagine that Jesus, he looks at John and sees a long line from John all the way to Turkey. I would imagine that Jesus looks at Thomas and sees a long line of believers behind him to the church in India. Or Andrew and sees a long line of believers to the church in Russia or Ukraine or Bulgaria or Greece. Or he looks through Simon the Zealot and sees Egypt and other North African nations. And whether we believe it or not, friends, there is a model here that one of these disciples, we can include Paul in this number, we can draw an evangelistic line all the way to you and I here in the U.S. today. It is the spiraling of Acts 1 and 8 to be Jesus' witnesses in Jerusalem and in all Judea and Samaria and to the ends of the earth. Friends, I want you to know that when you pray prayers, your prayers can reach generations far beyond you that you may never meet. In fact, I believe full well that most of us are in this room because people who we've never met generations before us were praying for us. And you can pray those kinds of prayers as well. But if we're going to pray these prayers for evangelistic legacy, then what should our legacies produce? Well, I think you can ask God for exemplified unity. That after praying for evangelistic legacy, you can pray that that evangelistic legacy produces exemplified unity. A unity that shows that we are together, we are joined for the purpose of what God is calling us to do. In verses 21 through 23, Jesus is praying for unity. He's like, I want them to be one just like you and I are one. And in this model, it is so powerful because Jesus is expressing here that I can pray this prayer because I am not wishfully praying that they do something that they've never seen. We are the model of what it is I'm asking for them to have. What a testimony of First Baptist Granbury. To say that what we want to see in our community, we have modeled in this faith community. That if there is love that needs to be present in our community, they can come to First Baptist and see it. If there's joy and there's hope that needs to be modeled in our community, they can come to our church and see it. Jesus is saying they don't have to start from ground zero. Father, they can look at you and me and see everything that I'm praying that you would do in them. And might that be your reality? That what you are praying that God would do around you is something that God has already done in you and through you. Because prayers are more effective when they are lived rather than labels. So to some children in this room, maybe you'll get to that classroom or maybe you'll get to that lunchroom and you'll see, hey, she's sitting by herself. God, I pray that you would give her a friend. When God might be asking you to be that friend. You might get to that locker room and see that there's a teammate who is unsure of himself. He's insecure. He doesn't feel like he can measure up and he can complete the task. Maybe he's in a new school and he has the giftings, but he doesn't have the community around him. God, I pray that you would give him confidence. Maybe God has called you to walk over and help give him some confidence. God, there's this woman on my job. There's this man on my job. They've been coming late. They've been leaving early. They haven't been communicating with their team like they normally would. They've been bringing in presentations late. God, I don't know what's going on, but God, I pray that you would bring peace in their life. But why don't you walk over and let them know that you're praying for them? You can be the answered prayer. You can ask God for evangelistic legacy. You can ask God for exemplified unity. But what does this exemplified unity mean? What is it all for? I think Jesus prays for exemplified unity. He prays for evangelistic legacy, but he also prays for eternal proximity. He says, God, I want them to be with me where I am. That God, beyond this existence that we have here in the natural, that there is a far greater existence that extends beyond space and time. That is what we are living for when we say that we are living to live again. And Jesus says, I want them to be with me. Because the reality is this, friends, that's what we hope. That when you're praying for that child and grandchild, it's not just that they would pass that test. I hope that at some point in that prayer you say, God, I want them to come to faith in you. Because when this test-taking stuff is all done, I want them to be with you forever. God, I don't just pray that my grandchildren are able to secure a good job and go to a great school and buy a nice house in a great community. No. Because all of that stuff passes away anyway. But I pray that when this is all said and done, that they find their eternal home with you. Eternal proximity. You know, that town that had that murky and foul river, years went by with them praying the same prayer. God, clean it up. Until that little girl walks in and says, hey, if these prayers are so beautiful, why is the river so ugly? Story is told that after she prays that prayer, there are some individuals in the room that hear that prayer not as a critique or condemnation to cause them to retreat, but to cause them to get active. There is a scientist, a lawyer, an activist that decides to do more than just pray. They study the source of the pollution. They traveled upstream to speak with the factory owners. They rallied the community to help with the cleanup. See, some of the townspeople were skeptical, telling them, we've already prayed for this. Don't you trust God to do the work? But the small group persisted. They worked to change policy and alongside others organized volunteer crews to clean up the trash and replant the riverbank with native grasses. As they worked, their actions became a living prayer, a tangible demonstration of their desire for the river's restoration. The river began to show signs of life again, and the community's hope returned. Do you know that in the beginning, God had a great design for the world, had a great design for the universe? In Genesis chapter 1, God's design was so great that he kept calling stuff good. And when he got to you and I, he said, it's very good. But then sin entered that situation. And because of our sin, brokenness was a result. And if I ask you right now what's broken in our world, you can give me one thing after another, we'll be here until next week. But what do we do about it? What can we do about it? Well, Jesus could have been seated up in heaven and says, hey, God, something needs to change. Hey, God, something needs to change. Hey, God, something needs to change. But there is a time that we know, as recorded in our canon, where Jesus says it's not just something to talk about. I've got to go and I've got to fix this problem. I've got to be the answered prayer. Because they keep on sacrificing Sally and Sue out on the ranch. And every day they want to sacrifice a lamb or a bull or a goat. And this isn't enough. I've got to come and I've got to be the prayer. And he does so. He's born through a virgin, lives a sinless life in which he heals the sick, raises the dead. And people come to faith in his ability, but it's not about his ability to perform miracles. It's about his ability to save, because he's the Messiah, the one who will save the people from their sins. And one day he dies. And it's a brutal death that was for you and for me, but he does it for us. But all people die. The difference between Jesus Christ and any of us is that he gets up, he rises from the dead on the third day. And one day he's going to come back with all that power that he used to perform those miracles, all that power that he used to get up from the grave. He's coming back as a reigning, redeeming, returning Lord, as the answer to our prayers. And there might be some here who don't live in that reality. But I want to let you know that today you can make a decision that is not based on your cognitive ability to understand what I'm saying, but the fact that Jesus has always been searching for you since before your mother knew your father's name. It might today be the day that that realization comes to fruition.